I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Welcome to the Q&A, everyone. Let me make a quick announcement before we get started here. I'm going to be gone this week, so the Bigfoot History Show will be posted this coming weekend on Sunday, so I won't be here to do it on Thursday. So that's where we are with that. So Forrest and Tom, I hope we got lots of good questions today.
We do. We got some excellent questions. Real quick, I just want to say thank you. We've got some new Patreons, and you know who you are. We're going to do an update here shortly, so we're going to say, we'll do a shout out to everybody. So thank you so much. And if you like the show, let us know. Hit the like and subscribe. It really irritates the algorithm. We'd love to do that. And if you want to support us further, you can do that with Patreon. There's a link in the description. And Will, I also want to say that we have a very special edition coming up here once you get back. So people stand by, and that'll be a real treat for everybody. All right. With that said, we do have questions.
Okay, let's jump into them.
Yes, Ben in California, he says he's in the Sierras, wants to know, Will, if I'm out looking for for a Bigfoot and I get very close to one, but it sees me, but I can't see it. For example, it's behind some bushes or trees or whatever. Will me getting close to it provoke it into doing the old, odor thing? Would I be able to smell it?
Only if you got hams around your neck. Oh, no, sorry. Probably not. If it's going to know you're there, so it's not going to be, too upset, unless you're, disturbing something in particular it's doing. But chances are no.
Yeah, if you're doing the recon by fire, where you're throwing rocks into the bush,
that could be a problem.
Yes,
they might return fire.
Well, if the rocks come flying back, you'll know. But that's actually a really good question.
It is.
Yeah,
yes.
I think a lot of people have that. What does it take to provoke these things to revealing themselves with that foul, nasty odor? And I'm not sure you really want to do that, because that may precede further activity that's negative and you don't want. So.
Yeah, Forrest, what do you think? I mean, for other primates, chimps, gorillas, etc., what do you think it takes to provoke them into a situation like that?
Well, most generally, it needs to be something that really gets them worked up and angry. And I think just walking by them or around them is not necessarily going to do such a thing. Just like you said, if you start provoking them, throwing things at them, but then, of course, you'd have to know that they were there. So, I mean, I think that you find in most accounts, people don't talk about having smelt anything. It's only in special circumstances that you do actually, see anybody recording that, oh, I smelt it, or I had a peculiar odor. And, the time that one was in the cabin, I did smell a peculiar odor. Of course, every animal has its own smell, and in close quarters, that could have very well been what caused me to smell that. And it might have been agitated at me. Maybe it was agitated because I didn't get up and get the can over. I don't know, but
it could be. It could be.
I think they have to do something to really provoke them to create the smell, and that's generally true with most primates.
It could be, there's a difference too between body odor and the stink that, and I've smelled it once, where particularly the individual was upset at our presence, but it didn't hang around very long. But yeah, I mean, sure, if you're close enough where you can smell something, you might smell body odor if it's wet or whatever. But as far as that, really super rank smell, that doesn't get reported very often. It was something the media picked up on many years ago, and it was like the stink, the screams, big feet, and the red eyes. Those were things that were picked up, and really those, the red eyes and the smell were actually very seldom reported, but it was something the media picked up on, and they kind of ran with that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. So Randy has, and actually, Will, he's got 4 questions. So why don't I do this? I'm going to go down. I'll just do them 4 separate questions. You can just answer them one at a time. What's that?
Yeah, one at a time, please.
One at a time. Okay. So
by the time you get to number 3, I've forgotten number 1. So
I'm with you 100%. I noticed that Will mentioned that Bigfoot tend to travel in a broad circular route around their territory, and that they may be gone for long periods of time, around a year. And from any one area, the total area that they roam through. So the first part of the question is, okay, so do Bigfoot usually cover their territory over an annual period, and such that they would have a reliable winter area to stay in and a summer area?
Well, okay, they do move pretty often. They don't really have like a winter area or a summer area. For instance, let's look at the area that I follow or track this one group around southern Washington for a dozen years. They'd be in various parts of that range, from month to month, but the weather is just what it was. I mean, they were, it didn't change by the area at all, if that makes any sense. They just, wherever they were throughout the range, they had to deal with inclement conditions or, warm, sunny conditions. It was just, they got whatever it was wherever they were. But yeah, they moved in that area. They moved in a circular motion. In other places, they don't move that way. It depends on the terrain.
Right. And I was just thinking, when you talk about like a summer area and a winter area, and that's a logical question.
It is.
The creatures, you think about the territory, Forrest, you got them there in Texas where it's blazing hot. You have them up in Alaska, so you've got polar extremes on both ends, and they thrive in both areas, it seems like. So I don't know how they do it, but it seems like temperature extremes aren't really a factor in their lives.
Well, they've learned how to adapt to those different conditions, but we did the same thing.
Well,
speak for yourself.
Exactly.
I don't like being too hot or too cold.
No, I'm just saying as humans spread out around the planet, we adapted to all these different environments, and these creatures have done the same thing.
Yeah. All right, so the second question is, in regards to Bigfoot that you were following near the Pacific coast, do they have certain times of the year, maybe winter, when they would come down along the coast and eat the ocean animals, the ocean prey, and other times when they go back into the higher mountains?
Well, Tom Seward says that that was an idea that Rene DeHinden had many years ago, but it never bore any fruit when he checked. They do come down out of the mountains, but, those cold regions in the mountains, the snow and all, it doesn't seem to bother them.
Well, and you said many times that they will, in the daytime, they're going to sleep. They're going to sort of bed down in the high elevations, and they'll come down nightly to the lower elevations for their hunting, and then go back up.
And we actually witnessed that in the field a couple of weeks ago. Remember?
I didn't forget at all.
The deer were almost exactly where I said they would be certain times of the day. Right? We'd see them, and we would hear the creatures. So
they really made themselves known
They did.
out of nowhere.
It was very predictable. It's something that I thought about years ago and observed, and we saw it in practice when we were up there.
Okay, the third question is, are there now some areas, maybe Florida, Louisiana, where they don't travel as much, or maybe are more or less in a permanent area?
Yeah, it's different for different parts of the country. Forrest, the creatures at your location, I would say, are kind of homesteading there. They don't seem to be gone most of the year, do they?
Yeah, I need to check. I need to check with the county and see if they filed homestead papers here. I would be happy for them to move around a lot more. I do say that I will find that there is more activity here during the fall, and I'm getting kind of preparing myself for that because we actually are coming into the fall of the year here, and the wintertime they seem to be more active in here. But we have a permanent, very, very large permanent population of white-tailed deer in this area, and so I think that precipitates them. They don't need to move around a whole lot, really, seriously. And we've got plenty of cover, as well as you've noticed. Y'all seen aerial photos of my place, so they got plenty of cover. It's not like they need to move from here to there to maintain cover. So
yeah, so it is. Yeah. It is different in different regions.
And that's going to be true for East Texas too.
Forrest, I found it interesting you said that they become more active in the fall in your area, and guess what? Same thing up here.
That's pretty
late summer.
That's pretty universal with these creatures. Fall seems to be the high time of the year of activity.
So it really doesn't have to do with temperature or anything. It's just, I don't know, the fall, they get busy. Okay. Part 4 is, do the size of the ranges vary across the country? And if so, what is known about that?
I'm sure it does. Really not a lot is known about that. It's going to be dictated by population and terrain and the various types of creatures, food supplies, all that kind of stuff.
That is an interesting question, because you think about it. I mean, North America, or just the northern, the continental U.S. I mean, there's huge differences in terrain and topography, so it could, possibly affect.
Many years ago, nobody talked about ranges with these creatures. Rene Hinden told me that, in his words, he says they weren't evenly distributed. They were in certain places, like concentrations, and he said they knew where they were, and of course that's all changed with people encroaching in forests and logging and all that kind of stuff. But what I found is, when I started looking at Clark and Skamania County south of Mount St. Helens, and looking at the reports and all the different movements of the creatures, and when I figured out they were moving in a circular fashion throughout that range, I identified it as a range, because they weren't really going outside of that. They were staying within the confines of that, 3,300 square mile area, but they were making a circular motion throughout it. So, I'm probably the first one that come up with that, and that was back in the 80s. So, and there really isn't a lot known about it since then.
Well, didn't Jeff Meldrum actually kind of verify that too in one instance, where he had found the same tracks from the same individual, and I think 2 or 3 different locations that showed that movement was over large areas.
Yeah, probably so. It's something. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out. It's time consuming, but it's not really that hard to figure out.
Kind of along the lines of that group that you followed was, because you've talked about, you call them the problem four. I call them the fab four, because they're hairy. Were they part of the same group that you were tracking? Because I think they were relocated across the Columbia River and went back, or
well,
what's the story on that?
Was later. That was later. Well, I don't want to talk too much about that, but because of the source of the information. But what I got was that they had crossed, and it was in 2012, from October through December. They had crossed north across the Columbia River. They settled into an area north of the town of Carson, and they hunted that area for 2 months, and then they went back south across the Columbia River. So, and that was the same group that I had tracked around that region all those years. And yeah, they were sort of out of, well, I guess they weren't out of their place. I mean, I didn't really, I don't know, on that part of the range, I didn't have a lot of reports. So, you know, they could have been going back and forth across the river numerous times at that time of year. But I don't know.
Okay. And I think they had 2 lead vocals, a bass, and a guitar player, and a drummer, right? So,
thus the problem
one of
for
those days.
Thus the problem for it, right?
Right. Okay. Harvey wants to know, do Bigfoot give birth at certain times of the year, and possibly in certain areas that are favorable to birth and juvenile Bigfoot?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a specific time of year. Do you think so, Forrest? I mean, other higher primates probably don't have a specific time of year, do they?
No, and mostly because those primates live in areas that are warmer climates, and they're not, you know, you've got longer, of course, longer sunlight actually affects humans as well as any other mammal in a reproduction. So you've got primates that are living in temperate climates and these humid, warm climates, and so they're going to actually have lots of sunlight all the time. So they're actually can breed any time of the year and produce children any time of the year. I think that if they were in some situation like, say, Alaska, that it would not be conducive to be having babies in the dead of winter, or even in the fall up there, late fall and early spring. So that might have something to do with the reproduction of Bigfoot in, say, Alaska or the Canadian, and even maybe some places in the northern Rocky Mountain area too.
But generally, monkey business on demand.
Monkey business on demand. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I was gonna comment, but you know, we're just gonna keep on moving here.
Oh heavens.
Okay. Same person wants to know: has a pregnant or nursing Bigfoot ever been seen?
Well, they saw big Patty.
Yeah, I would say nursing ones. I'm not sure about a pregnant one. I don't know offhand. I would suspect when they're in that condition, they're probably, you know, a little farther away from where, you know, humans would have access to those areas. Typically, you don't see females as often as the males anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to be with their infants, and they're going to keep those infants protected and hidden.
Yeah, they're going to be in the core areas, so the males are most likely going to be in the outer parts of where they're, you know, currently located, feeding, etc.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that totally dovetails into this person's second part of the question, and that is, do you think Bigfoot would ever hide their young and leave them to go hunting like wolves, or would they always travel with their youngsters?
I have some information, but I'm not ready to divulge that just yet.
Can I make a guess?
Sure.
Okay, I'm guessing that if they're able, they may carry those young with them because, let's face it, most primates, your gorillas and your chimpanzees just throw those kids on the back of their back and away they go, or they're clinging underneath to their chest. And we have had reports that they have seen Bigfoot actually doing this as well. But I'm going to guess that if they are going to go off on a hunt that may not way off, like miles and miles off, but they could very well leave infants with juveniles.
True.
To take care of them. Young female juveniles are just like little girls when you bring the baby home, and the little girls all want to hold the baby. Oh, let me hold the baby. Let me hold baby brother. Let me hold baby sister. Primates are exactly the same way. I don't care anywhere. They're always grabby. Oh, I want to hold a baby. I want to hold a baby. They have a total fascination with them. So I can see Bigfoot going off and doing a hunt and leaving the babies with a responsible older juvenile, female juvenile. But like most primates, I would suspect that they just throw that kid on their back or throw it on their chest and away they go.
All right. Do you think that Bigfoot hunting is a group effort done by each individual for themselves, or maybe sex selected? Like, is it human, and some go extinct in apes?
Well,
So I think what they're asking is this kind of a male thing that the hunting, or do the females get involved as well? And
no,
I think I understand.
I'll dip into my source information. What I was given was that they'll hunt twice a day, once as an individual, and another time as a group.
Really? That's interesting. I thought it was once a day. So,
No.
Okay.
Because they don't sleep 8 hours like we do. They're going to be active throughout a 24-hour cycle.
Right.
Well,
And
oh, I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, and we know that it's not always meat that they're going for. That's predominantly it. But they like berries and other things,
They'll supplement
natural
their diet.
edibles.
Yeah, they'll supplement their diet with that other stuff. Go ahead, Forrest.
Well, I was just going to say, really, chimpanzees and baboons are the only monkey species that really go out there and hunt. And I don't mean to be saying chimpanzees or monkeys; they're actually apes. But they don't actually actively hunt other species of monkeys and other animals for meat. Most generally, when they do that, it is the males that do the hunting. And then when they come back and then they share the meat, it is done in a hierarchical fashion, and even females that are high up in the hierarchy of that troop will be fed, even though they may not have been not have partaken in the actual taking of that food. So they will then come big from the and it's usually an alpha male and his beta supporters that go out and do the hunting, and they will then disperse that meat amongst the hierarchy of the group, and it's always the higher ups that get fed first, and then whatever's left, the scraps go to the peons in the group. And I'm sure it probably works the same way in Bigfoot. I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably.
All right. So do you think, the next part of the question is, what is known about the differences between the Bigfoot sexes? Is there dimorphism? Does it vary between the subtypes? Do you think the age to sexual maturity or lifespan might vary with the different subtypes?
I have no idea. Might have to throw that one at Forrest.
Well, sexual dimorphism is common in all primates. Your males are always bigger than the females. What was the rest of that question? So I'm assuming that Bigfoot would be exactly the same way. I mean, most generally, I think you have found, haven't you, Will, in your travels and researching that when you've seen the females, that they seem to be smaller than the males.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. So I expect that sexual dimorphism occurs in them as well. So, and what was the second part of that question, Tom? I'm sorry.
Okay, so, and the second part of the question is, do you think age to sexual maturity or lifespan might vary with the subtypes?
No, I suspect it's probably the same. I mean, all primates as a whole develop slower to maturity than do other mammals. However, man develops the slowest. And I think that's the fact that we have culture and we have created a whole society that protects our young. So therefore the young don't have to develop as fast. You don't have that obviously in, bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas. They're not sitting around a campfire cooking food and having a social hour. And somebody's going to say that this is not right, but they don't have culture like we have. And culture has developed and protected humans in the long run. And that's why we develop slower to maturity rather than the other primates. So, and primates do live longer and they do take longer to develop to maturity, but they don't take as long as humans do.
And again, I was told that the Sasquatch actually it grows faster than humans do at a quicker rate. So they do mature. I suppose, in comparison to other higher primates, it's very similar.
Yeah, I would suspect so. They all the other primates develop faster than humans do.
All right, so do Bigfoot types in Alaska seem to be substantially different than the rest of the continent, especially given how isolated it is and such a different habitat? And I'm just going to tag onto that. Will, there is a term actually for Will and Forrest there's a concept or a theory, or maybe it's fact, that the further north you go of the equator, creatures tend to get larger.
Yeah.
That is true.
Isn't that Bergman's rule?
Yes.
And so
I suspect that I've never seen a Bigfoot in Alaska. Fred'd be the one that we need to contact for that question, but I suspect that they are much, much larger than even the ones that you guys have got in your area. And I think your guys your Bigfoot tend to be larger than ours down here.
Yeah. Montana seems to have very large ones as compared to, other areas in the lower 48 states. They're probably on par with what's in Alaska.
Well, and Fred mentioned on the first time that we had him on that one of the ones they saw outside their cabin, he said it was 14 feet tall. So I'm not good at math, but that's a big Bigfoot.
That's a big boy.
Yeah. And I believe that's the one he cycled 3 rounds. He had a 30-06 bolt action, shot it in the chest 3 times, and it just almost acted as if nothing happened.
Swatting flies.
Right. All right. So this person is also wondering, what do you think about the direction of Bigfoot research over the last 40 years? I'm not asking about individuals or names, but just the general trends, progress in the research in the community.
Well, my opinion is there's been virtually no progress. I mean, I know people gripe about that, but it stays circular. People keep going and reinventing the wheel all the time.
Well, I think that we both can kind of agree, though, that don't you think the notoriety, I mean, it's become a little more acceptable with the general public. Used to people would kind of poo-poo the idea of, Bigfoot. And I think if not finding Bigfoot show did anything, they did bring it to the forefront of the public, and people started accepting that, well, maybe old Joe Blow down here that says he saw a Bigfoot, maybe he's really not making things up. Maybe he's not having, drug-induced delusions or whatever. Maybe he really did see that, And I think that that if they did anything for Bigfoot, they did that. They brought it to the forefront of the general public and made it a little more acceptable, and a little less
snicker factor.
So that, yes, and that people would be less afraid to actually stand up and say, hey, you know what I saw the other night or I saw the other day? Let me tell you about this. So I think they did that much for it.
Well, and I think the mass media, internet media specifically, has done a lot of that. And one thing we know for sure is that for whatever reason, Bigfoot does not seem to be attracted to or curious about raves in the woods, lasers, light balls.
Or brass bands.
Right. So leave that stuff at home if you're looking for these things. All right. So this person goes on and they want to know, have you, Forrest, have either one of you ever spoken to university level academics who actually took the subject seriously, even if it was off the record?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. When I took anthropology courses many years ago, I barged into my advisor's office, who was actually also the head of the anthropology department, and I kind of did a Renee DeHenden with him. I wanted to know what his thoughts were on Bigfoot. and he was actually pretty open about it.
Well, I have to say my own personal experience is that I have found oftentimes the university level academics, and not necessarily those working in the university, but people that have, some sort of a graduate degree, a master's or a PhD, quite often are very intrigued by the subject, and they tend to be open, and they're not put off by it. And, that's kind of a refreshing, like a breath of fresh air. So not all of them, but surprisingly, quite a few of them that I've met really are.
Well, I actually had an archaeology professor that I did my field school with, and I don't even know how we got on the subject. We were down in a pit digging at the time, and we got sidetracked on somebody brought up Bigfoot, and he actually said that he had, Utah has a lot of sightings of Bigfoot up there, and he had actually seen one up in Provo Canyon. So, and so I was like totally intrigued, and we spent most of the evening talking about that, as I recall, around the campfire, and then when I came back here in Texas, then I actually had a professor, an Indian professor from India, that he talked to the class. And there was a lot of students, and there was kind of like, yeah, the Yeti and all that sort of stuff, and the Bigfoot, man, that doesn't really. And he was like, oh, yes, it does exist. And, don't laugh at natives when they tell you about these animals, and because there's got to be a historical basis for them talking about this. All myths have some basis in truth. And he had family members that had seen Yeti up in the the Himalayas there. So he was a total believer, and he taught his classes that way. So, there's plenty of academics out there that believe in it. Some academics that don't want to talk about it because there's still, unfortunately, too many people that will put you down and, don't want people talking about stuff like that.
Well, sadly, I think we're slowly coming to realize that, by gosh, a lot of the Native American, the Indian legends here, especially when it comes to Bigfoot, they seem to know what they're talking about. Case in point, would be the Haunted Valley. And that one always kind of cracks me up a little bit. They couldn't be persuaded to go there, but they would also warn the white settlers, don't go there. That's a bad place. And I always wondered if some of them didn't go, hey, excellent spot to go to and, build your ranch over there. All right, it's just my dark humor. It comes out once in a while. But, yeah, you're right. It's kind of refreshing to hear that this professor from India was, took it seriously and took the reports from so-called undereducated people seriously on the topic, because a lot of times they're the ones that are out there where these things are, and they a lot of them are very in tune to the environment there. So when something sticks out like that, they know what they're talking about. Okay. Moving on, are there any Bigfoot conventions or seminars that have been doing good things in terms of advancing knowledge in the area? And I'm just going to throw in, I know there's a lot of Bigfoot seminars that are really good in advancing trinkets and autographs and that sort of thing. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
did I say that? I didn't mean to.
Well, that's all I've seen with these things, and I'm thinking I see all these things posted on Facebook, and they have all these speakers, and I'm thinking, just what do these people actually know? I don't know. I don't get involved in those things. Originally, the conferences or what have you were started because John Green and Renee DeHinden and those guys in Grover Krantz, they were trying to get the scientific community talking about this, involved in it. That was the whole point of those things. And they tried a couple of them, they didn't work. And the average people out there, they sort of picked it up, and it is what it is today.
They're festivals.
Pretty much, yeah.
Carnival festivals. I don't begrudge people for going to them, and I don't begrudge them for having them. I just, the time that personally that I would spend at one of these conferences, I'd rather spend it in the field. For me, that's more productive, but that's just my personal opinion. Okay.
I've never been to one.
I haven't either. Okay, what are researchers doing right, and what kind of things have they done that might be harmful or unproductive? And I will add raves in the forest.
What I see some of them doing right now are being more skeptical instead of just immediately jumping on something and saying, that's Bigfoot evidence. Well, you got to ferret it out and make sure that it is, and it's not something else.
Yeah, that drives me nuts. And I've been guilty of that too. I would see things that I was sure was Bigfoot evidence, but I think you have to be open-minded to accept, okay, that really isn't, and that
sure.
That advances the knowledge, both the larger picture and also your own knowledge. Because if you can't do that, you're really wasting your. What are you doing out there?
Yeah, you need to be able to say, I was wrong about that. It was this instead of this.
Yeah, very much so. What would you like to say?
I got kicked off of a site, and I won't even tell you what it was because I kept seeing all these pictures they were posting, and I said, it's pareidolia. That's pareidolia. Oh, no, that's pareidolia. That's pareidolia. And I literally had the person that was the, I thought they might want, that's stupid me, for thinking that they might want somebody that had a little bit of, knowledge about primates and such that would comment on what they were posting out there. And I literally was blocked. They were like, no, can't you see the Bigfoot right there? And I'm like, no. It was kind of one of those, what do they call them, Bigfoot blobs?
The blob squatch, yeah.
Yeah, the blob squatch.
Well,
I was like, no. And I thought, well, that was the last time I really kind of went on a Bigfoot site anymore, because it was like, this is, you just accept anything and everything. Well, you can't be that way. You have to be skeptical.
And there's some people.
If you're not, then there's absolutely no reason for you even being in the field.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that just accept anything blindly. A good example I can give is I had a picture of something that I took in Northern California back around 2005 or 7, and a few people wanted to do enhancements for me so we could get a clear look at what was in the picture. And they were well-meaning, I'll give them that, but they would totally ignore the object that was in the picture that I wanted enhanced, and they would find these images in other parts of the picture that weren't there. And and another one, I've had people send me pictures of these supposed Sasquatch faces, that are coincidentally the same color as the vegetation.
A lot of green Sasquatch out there.
Right, and I think someone told me once, in the software, when they do the editing of those things, it creates artifacts that can look like objects or faces.
Well, the human brain, there's something in our brain that actually causes us to see human features in things.
We're hardwired to see the human form.
Yeah, we're hardwired to see that. So, we can create things, and our mind can create things for us to see, and we start, having facial recognition in trees, and they're not really anything there other than just leaves.
And I can tell, something that was really amazing to me when I took my sight courses, that when we were on vision, and we're talking about how in each eye we have a blind spot right in the middle of our vision. And what our brain does is it takes all these pieces of information from around the blind spot and it fills in the blanks so that we don't perceive a blind spot. So our brains are really amazing tools with what it can do. And there was a they said, it cracked me up, the professor said, oh yeah, this is neat little party tricks you can do to your friends, and there's a way you can actually see your blind spot. And I can't remember how it's done offhand, but you do it with a penny on a piece of paper, and you look at it and cover one eye or something like that. But I'll have to look it up, and we can post that. But it demonstrates just how amazing our brains are, that it can recreate, taken from all the pieces of information around the blind spot in our field of vision and fill that blind spot in so that we never perceive that there is a blind spot. So, and it kind of goes back to when I was in the military too. They talked about, you kind of have to think around how your brain works. How we look, and if people know about baseball, the strike zone, from your shoulder to your knee, and that's kind of where our vision is fixated. And if you could be outside of that, in other words, like when they tell you to get down if somebody's shooting at you, that's not just for cover, you're outside of that vision area that people focus on.
Interesting.
Well,
so our brains do amazing things.
Oh yeah. When we were out a couple weeks ago, and we'd be out at 2 a.m, and I was looking up at the stars, and
right.
You could focus directly on one star
Yeah.
and it fades into almost nothing.
Right.
And just look to the side. And that's what they taught us in the Coast
Right.
Guard is
Right.
look slightly to the side, one side or the other. It's just the way it is. Okay. How does Sasquatch in Russia, Siberia compare to the types in North America? Are they different? What do we know about that?
Well, I'm sure there are differences. I haven't really studied the types there. I've been more focused on what we've got here, and that's a handful all by itself. But I'm sure there are differences because the breeding pools don't mix.
Okay, and then going on here, this person wants to know, what do you know about Sasquatch research in Russia or Scandinavia? Are there any reputable people getting results and information? And I would like to know that.
I don't think there is any in Scandinavia. In fact, we've got a person there that's part of the JRG group, and she's an American married to a Norwegian, but she did a little digging, and there is some, of course, Norwegian stuff when they talk about the frost giants or the stone giants. That's what these creatures are called there. Central Europe, it's trolls. And different names all over. So the Russians had been doing some stuff. There were one or two people that are still doing things over there. I don't know the extent of their work, though.
Well, it's interesting, and this is kind of dovetails into that special that's coming up, but we, Kurt, Laura, and myself, and this person that we took her out for a day and a half, and she camped out up in the Cascades. And we talked about Bigfoot in Europe, and she said it's just not part of the culture. Everybody's involved in a lot of other different things, but they're just not there, and so it's not really, most of the mountainous and even the wooded areas are, you just walk a couple miles in any direction and you're going to see a little house or a little village or something.
Well, and especially Central Europe, like Germany and places like that, in France, those countries were at war, and so much destruction in the 20th century. So I wouldn't expect to see much there,
Right.
But you get into Eastern Europe, and we had the gentleman, Michael Kilcourse, who contacted me, and we talked about that once before, where he was there and got chased out of the woods by one of the creatures. And I can't remember which country he was in, but it was an Eastern European country.
That was my question. Yeah, which country? But that would kind of makes sense because you get closer to the Eastern European around Russia, and you're going to have a lot more, a lot more wilderness areas.
Yeah, I would expect a lot more in that part of the country and moving east.
All right, so this person also wants to know, okay, so we kind of touch on this, Norway, Finland, Sweden, it is what it is, but they also want to know, many Indian tribes have stories about little people in addition to Bigfoot. Are the two reports related at all? Might the little people be another subspecies of hominid, or maybe just juvenile Bigfoot?
Well, a friend of mine who was a member of the Klamath tribe told me, he would talk occasionally about the little people, and he just would say they're mischievous. They look just like the big ones, but they're mischievous. So I always wondered if they weren't juveniles in reality. What do you think, Forrest?
I think you're probably correct. It's entirely possible that maybe there is a smaller species of Bigfoot out there. I mean, we don't really know.
That's true. We don't know a lot about what's out there.
But, when you're talking about the European and the Russian Bigfoot, what do they call them? The almond or
The almas.
almas? Yes, in Russia. Wouldn't it be great if you could find somebody that actually lived in that area that would come on the show and talk about it? That would be really interesting.
I messaged Igor Bortsev, who
Yeah.
does.
Bortsev, yes,
Yeah,
Igor Bortsev. I was
and-
trying to think of his name.
and
I
he
could
was-
come up with Igor.
Yeah, he was open to coming on the show, but we never heard back from him, to set it up.
Well, I contacted him and I sent him an email, and it was sent 3 days after Russia's latest little soiree into the Ukraine. And so I think there's a kind of a digital iron curtain. And even if there isn't, it's just self-imposed.
Yeah.
People are just not going to,
Maybe
wait till
at some
things settle down.
maybe at some point. So Igor, if you're listening, you have an open invitation to come on and talk to us. We'd like to hear about what's going on there.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by. I've seen 2 or 3 really credible reports from Russia on these things. I bet there's probably
Oh, I'm sure
tons
lots more.
Yeah, lots more. When I say credible reports, YouTube videos. There was a couple of little boys that had been playing in the snow, and for all intents and purposes, it looked legit, and they were following these footprints into like a thicket of deciduous trees. And just as they got to it, something in the trees bolted off quickly, took off running. The kids took off running the opposite direction, apparently using Russian equivalent 4-letter words. But what's interesting was the mayor of the town. I can't remember the guy's name, but I think he's
He's a world famous wrestler or something. Isn't
yeah,
he?
he was a fighter, wrestler. Yeah. Yeah, and he has to like pry himself in and out of his Mercedes Benz, and it's a big one too. And it turns out he seems like a really nice guy. He sat down, he's fascinated by the Bigfoot topic.
He didn't
So
like those children swearing.
Right, that was the thing. He was very glad that they got the video and that they saw it, that they had an interest in it. But then he scolded him for using swear words. And but he just struck me as a real nice guy,
And he's highly intelligent, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And I think you and I discussed this before, because I made the comment. I said, I have made the comments before, and unfortunately, in our lingo, we have too many times have referred to, including some people that abide in the White House, have used the term Neanderthal as a insult to people, and I would never take it that way, because I keep reminding people they actually existed on the earth for a longer period of time than Homo sapien sapien does today. Anyway,
yeah, but you really
you and I
disappointed
discussed
me.
when I looked at him. I said, I've always said that Eastern Europeans and a lot of Russians and that along that corridor there in the Caucasus region and such, and the Ural Mountains too, have that brow ridge and that strong features like a Neanderthal. And that man, I swear he does. He looks very Neanderthal in his features, and he's a highly intelligent man.
Yeah, he's very intelligent, and I would never see otherwise in front of him, because
oh no,
he can pound you into smithereens.
Well,
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that being called a Neanderthal should not be an insult. Not at all.
It's not a derogatory term.
They were not stupid people to have existed on this earth, and I frankly think that there are probably places in the Ural Mountains and the Caucasus, easy for me to say, Caucasus region in there, that I would be willing to bet you. I bet there's still some strongholds of Neanderthals out there.
So kind of getting back to that topic, I would be very interested in talking to anyone on the Asian continent, whether someone from China, because they have creatures there, someone from India, talking about the Yeti in their regions, Eastern Europe, Russia, any of those places.
Even the Vietnam War veterans that ran across the rock apes, too.
Absolutely. So if anyone, from Vietnam would like to talk to us, we'd love to hear from you about the rock apes.
Yeah, that is. I got to say that's one of the favorite things I like about this show is, you know, we've had considerable discussions with people in Australia with the Yowie. It's the same thing. The behavior's the same. You know, just the similarities are undeniable
And
very
as
interesting.
far as that, you know, I've got. Let me think here. I'll look real quick. I haven't got his name on here. Darn it. We got a friend of ours who's in Australia, and he's been sending these old stories from around the early 20th century of Yowie encounters there. So, you know, I wanted to let him know how much those are appreciated. Love the historical stuff. But let's see.
Well, I just want to do a quick shout out to all of our friends in Australia. You guys know who you are.
They're amazing.
And
all of you folks.
Yes, they've been on our show, and I hear from them from time to time. So thank you so much. That's
yeah, we'll have to do
great.
We'll have to do an update here soon with some of the folks there.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, y'all
So
talk
get
to
a hold
those
of us.
gentlemen- Y'all talk to those gentlemen that got those absolutely stupendous thermal film footage that I forget what they call themselves out there, but it's a group of 4 or 5 men that go out and
The Yowie Australian Research, I think.
yes.
If I botched it, guys, send me an email. Let me know.
Before we go too
Oh,
further,
they have some fantastic film footage.
they get a lot
yeah.
of great stuff. Yeah, I wanted to mention too. We hit on Vietnam there for a minute. Not just the folks who live in Vietnam or from Vietnam, but the GIs who were there. And I say that from one old GI who was trained by Vietnam vets. If you guys are listening and you know anything about rock apes or had encounters, get a hold of us.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, and we had the guy from Indonesia a while back.
Dolly.
And
yeah.
yeah. And I just can't help but wondering if there's not a connection. Geographically, it's, sort of in the same region.
Sure. Oh, I'm sure.
There's water in between, but other than that,
we got time for one more question, Tom. Then we'll have to close this session out. We're getting close on our time here.
Okay, so this has to do with a topic that a lot of people bring up, and that is, do Bigfoot is the mouth? It's been described that, and I think even Lee talked about this, that on some of these creatures, the mouth goes, they don't have any lips. So I want to get your confirmation on that. And the mouth goes almost back to the cheekbones. It's like they could pop a watermelon practically if they wanted to.
The mouth. And, you have to think about the size of the creature and the head size. I mean, it may give the appearance of being disproportionately large just because the creature is huge. But going back to the lips now, yeah, they don't have lips. That's something that's always been noted with close-up sightings. And actually, humans are the only ones that have true lips like we do.
Yeah, your primates, I don't know of any primates that have lips other than us.
And I can't remember
and you'll notice that,
my professor sort of speculated about why that developed, and I can't remember what their reasoning was, but I don't think anybody really knew.
Now,
I don't know. Somebody told me once it was for kissing, and I'm like, no, because you can watch mother chimpanzees.
Oh yeah.
Well, actually, they all primates kiss.
Sure.
They kiss infants, so they will even sometimes affectionately kiss other primates. So, I mean, that wasn't the reason. I don't know the reason, and you know what? I don't ever remember anybody ever addressing.
Well,
that.
I did have one professor.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, I had one professor who talked about it, but I don't recall what he said. And I think it was just theoretical at the time. It wasn't anything concrete. They had really no idea why lips developed in humans, but not other primates.
Yeah, but all your primates have like just slits in their mouth.
And the Sasquatch is the same way.
And their mouth, and their mouths, all of them, they can open them to incredible they can pop, fruit in there the size of a softball in their mouth. And
you see pictures of orangutans often like that, where they open their mouths really huge, and of course we think it's funny, but yeah, chimps are the same way, and I'm sure gorillas are too.
Yeah. Well, and then you get into your macaques and such, and they have these little pouches on the side of their cheeks, and you will see them. They stuff them full of fruit, and that's partly because they're a smaller primate. They spend a lot of time on the ground, and they go around in normal situations and the total feral situations, and unfortunately, in most of these Asian countries, the tigers have been hunted to extinction in these areas. So the macaques really don't have anything other than most of your large constrictor snakes that pose any type of predator action on them. So they used to, in a normal situation, spend a lot of time on the ground eating, and they would pick up this stuff, and instead of taking the husk off the fruit and everything, they just stuff it in their mouth, and then these pouches that fill up, kind of like a chipmunk type thing.
Don't you guys remember kids doing that?
Yeah, well, yeah, M&Ms, yeah, and then they go up in the trees, and then they would take your rambutans and such as that, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but and they would dehusk them and then eat the fruit. And they just keep popping them. I mean, you can even see them. They'll reach up and move them out of their cheek with their hands, take them and pop them back into their mouth, and then they'll spit it out, and they'll start peeling those husks off of it, and then they'll eat the fruit, the inside of the fruit. And I mean, that's the way they've always naturally fed. Now they just more or less, because they're so used to humans being around them, and they will just sit there and eat the stuff on the ground. But that didn't used to be the way they fed.
Very interesting. Well, with that, we're going to wrap the session, folks. Any final thoughts, guys?
I want to thank everybody for excellent questions. And again, keep them coming. You guys keep the topic alive, keep the show going, and we're grateful. So thank you very much.
We did get a request for a show. One of our listeners asked if we would discuss the evidence that supports the existence of the creature. So we will do that on an upcoming show, folks. So having said that, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. Be back next weekend. And that's that. So everyone, we appreciate you listening. In Bigfoot history, near Richland, Washington, summer 1966, about a dozen boys from the Tri-Cities area were making a pastime of hunting the white demon, an 8-foot-tall, dull white, hair-covered animal of very heavy build, with eyes that shone red in the dark. They would drive around at night looking for it, most commonly finding it in an abandoned gravel pit near West Richland. They shot at it several times. Once it chased a car and scratched and dented the door. It had a high-pitched scream and left tracks more than 16 inches long, like a wide human foot. Roger Patterson heard about these boys shortly afterward and talked to several of them. He said he also talked to people at the sheriff's office, and they were aware of what was supposed to be going on, but had not done anything serious about it. Early in 1967, Renee DeHinden and I questioned two of the boys, and in trying to locate another of them, we talked to his mother. She confirmed that the boys had discussed what they were doing at that time it was supposedly going on, and that their boy had taken her husband's deer rifle with him one night. Like the sheriff's deputies, the parents had not seen fit to do anything about it. Names given to me by Roger Patterson were Roger True, Carl and Jim Franklin, John McKnight, Tom Thompson, Alvin Anderson, Greg Pointier, Shelby Green, Roger Howard, Bob McDonald, and Ron Blackburn. I no longer recall which ones I spoke to. The country around the gravel pit is completely open, with little vegetation and no mountains within many miles. We could think of no possible reason for a Sasquatch to be there. On the other hand, the boys sounded very convinced, and the reports tallied with those from other parts of the Yakima Valley that year. They said had been cruising around in the small hours of the early morning. They could find the white demon. Once it paced a car running 40 miles an hour.
The Spokane Indians, 1975. Indians had a Sasquatch too. Those who think the stories about a huge, hairy mystery giant called a Sasquatch are of a recent origin should talk with the Wenatchee Valley College historian, John Brown. Brown has found evidence that the search for such a legendary creature was underway in the Northwest by the time the earliest white men arrived in the region. While researching material for a book he co-authored with Dr. Robert Ruby, The Spokane Indians, Children of the Sun, he came across a passage that must relate to what is now called a Sasquatch. The reference was in a letter written by the Reverend Elkanah Walker from Fort Colville in 1840. With his wife, Mary, Elkanah Walker was a missionary to the Spokanes. In a letter to the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions, he wrote, "I suppose you will beat with me if I trouble you with a little of their, the Spokane Indians, superstition, which has recently come to my knowledge. They believe in the existence of a race of giants, which inhabit a certain mountain off to the west of us. This mountain is covered with perpetual snow. They inhabit its top. They may be classed with Goldsmith's nocturnal class, as they cannot see in the daytime. They hunt and do all their work in the night. They are men stealers. They come to the people's lodges in the night when the people are asleep, and put them under their skins and take them to their place of abode without their even waking. When they awake in the morning, they are wholly lost, not knowing in what direction their home is. The account the Indians give of these giants will in some measure correspond with the Bible account of such a race of beings. They say their track is about 1.5 feet long. They will carry 2 or 3 beams upon their back at once. They frequently come in the night, steal their salmon from the nets, and eat them raw. If the people are away, they always know when they are coming very near by their strong smell, which is most intolerable. It is not uncommon for them to come in the night and give 3 whistles. Then the stones will begin to hit the houses. The people are troubled with their nocturnal visits." Brown says he has known about many Spokane Indian legends about monsters, but they have been of the Paul Bunyan type that carves out valleys, etc. The ogre referred to in the letter is not really a monster, just a little bigger than man, and he had no idea what mountain to the west is referred to, the one that always is snow-topped. Perhaps it was Mount Rainier. The Spokanes also believed in a race of little people, Brown says. Even if the stories about the little people and the giants aren't true, the Indians believed they were, he says. Many people today believe just as fervently in the existence of a hairy, man-like object that sometimes is glimpsed, but never really seen. Plaster casts of prints supposedly from the feet of such a creature have been exhibited. One Sasquatch hunter has what he believes to be a picture of the man-animal. This area's involvement with the legend goes back some 25 or 30 years to the wild man of Leichenwasser, supposedly seen on that mountain by fishermen. Myth or fact, no one knows. But at any rate, John Brown's research indicates that reports of such a Bigfoot are nothing new. September 22nd, 1975. Wenatchee, Washington. Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.